What is sex? We've all had the typical between two people who are madly in love with each other speech, but what's the actual definition for it? There are many words that are used to describe sex, whether it's intercourse, making love, fucking, horizontal tango, and my personal favorite, because of Big Bang Theory, coitus.
Why? It's just not a good time.
Leonard has a lady over.
Yeah, right. Your grandmother back in town? No, she's not a lady. She's just a new neighbor.
Hang on, there really is a lady here?
Uh-huh.
And you want us out because you're anticipating coitus?
I'm not anticipating coitus.
So she's available for coitus?
Can we please just stop saying coitus?
Technically, that would be coitus interruptus.
But they all mean the same thing. And basically, sex is when two living organisms get together and exchange genetic data so they can reproduce. Genetics basically want to make sure they're absolutely immortal, and they want to make sure that they last forever, which is why some of us want to have as many babies as we can. And our personal satisfaction of having a baby is that everyone basically wants to have a legacy carried on. They want to have their name, no matter how long it's been since they passed or anything like that. They want to be remembered for something. And what better way of doing that than having a baby? Yeah, you could be known for writing a book, starting an empire, or inventing something, but is for sure way of doing it is easily having a baby. Sex is basically all about continuing the human species. Well, at least some sexes, but that's typically what it was made for. That's its main purpose. And fertility is extremely important when it comes to sex, and it has been so important ever since the earliest of mankind. And the reason why is because if you had a lot of kids, you had a lot of workers. And people back then only really wanted to work for someone with a lot of power, or because they basically kind of belonged to you, which is why many empires back then always employed their children. Because if you had a lot of children as your employers, they can't really do anything about it really, and they kind of stay with you, and they help you build up your empire, which in turn made them successful and wealthy in the end, which is still sometimes the case in the US even today, because we still have a lot of family-owned businesses, which it's easier to have a business and build your own from the ground up if you have kids working for you. Well, your own kids at least, not that'd be child labor laws. But however, a lot of people today aren't actually having that many kids anymore, because kids are actually pretty expensive, and because the economic state that our country's in, and even other countries for that matter, they just can't afford to have kids. Okay, so when dealing with fertility, people used to try and manipulate it and kind of determine whether or not you could actually have sex, or even kids for that matter, when you're not married. And another thing that used to try and manipulate is when you were actually supposed to get married, and this depended on how it benefited you in any way. And these benefits were basically your wealth and what you have accumulated over time, all your belongings and your materialistic kind of stuff. And what they wanted to do is kind of manipulate as to who actually received all of your stuff basically. And so they wouldn't have to worry about someone else getting it. They would always be ensured that their next of kin would get it. So they could kind of control as to where their wealth and everything else could go, and they would be in charge of that, and that's what they try to manipulate. And then people were also told when dealing with fertility and back then when you could actually have kids, and this was basically a certain age period as to when you could reproduce. And this was and even people themselves would try and think of a good time to actually do it, because that way that they could have some sense of control over when their stuff would actually be given away. You know what I'm saying? If they wanted to wait until to ensure that their kids were gonna be old enough and responsible enough, they would kind of wait until and to like a more mature age to have kids, so they kind of control like to when exactly like how and when their wealth was going to be passed on, basically. And then another thing with fertility that not many people would think that are related is that technology and fertility are actually pretty related, surprisingly. And like technology isn't just like your phone or your laptop or like some device that you could hold in like the palm of your hand or anything like that. Technology is actually just knowledge about how to do something. And so the technology for fertility could, like, it's found like in the United States and even in China. And like, for instance, in China, like back then and even still today, they used to use acupuncture for fertility and like to kind of like help it along. And it's like acupuncture is good for you, like anyways, like it's supposed to like distress you and stuff like that, but they used to use it for fertility as well. But we'll talk about that more later on into the course. So before, people also believed that there were things in the environment that could actually enhance fertility as well. Nowadays, people more so believe that there are certain positions that you could do during sex that can actually increase your fertility. And all of these ideas of particular techniques to increase fertilities goes like way back, like centuries and centuries back. Like they've always been like thinking that certain things in the environment and even like sexual positions can like increase your chances of having a baby more so. And then you could also stop fertility, and the obvious way to do that would be just to stop having sex completely and practice like abstinence. But there's also like a selective abstinence where you would just stop having sex during certain times of the month. So basically the times that you're not ovulating, like you wouldn't have sex, or that time to like ensure that like you kind of wouldn't have sex. But like sex today is typically just a mix. It's like the perfect mix between like pleasure and for the like the main purpose of reproducing. However, like it's kind of more so pleasure today for like obvious reasons, you know. But I mean, it still is like the perfect mix almost. It's not just typically for reproducing like it was back in the day. So sex is actually really essential to us, and it's essential to us in a few ways. It's essential biologically, culturally, socially, and even technologically. And which the reasoning for those will be discussed later on throughout the course. And as you progress, it will go into more depth of those reasons. But yeah, so that's it.